Have you found that tape yet of you wrestling The Rock?
You know what's funny?
What's up, everyone? Shaquille Mahjoudi here, and you know who this is. Name a major North American pro wrestling promotion, and he has probably stepped through their doors ahead of Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling's Northern Rising this Saturday on Triller TV, equipped with a Canadian destroyer that rivals Petey Williams. Maple Leaf President Scott D'Amore, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Shaquille. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for doing this. I'd love to start there. I know that you had sort of turned down a pitch to hit AJ Styles with the Canadian Destroyer back in the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
Which is just a ridiculous proposition, and I know you were heavily against the idea, but I would love to just understand what the room looked like. Like, does AJ know? Did AJ hear about this pitch? Who was for it? Who was against it to the degree that you're willing to share?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, like this is ancient history in the wrestling world, and so it's I don't have any problems. To me now, I would never have mentioned it at the time because the headline would have been conflict backstage at TNA. Executives clash. I don't think I was an executive then. But it was really what it was is, that Canadian Destroyer was so unique. It was such a hot, cool move. And in wrestling, there's so few things where people look at it and go, "Oh my God!" Like I don't even really understand what I just saw there, and that's what the Canadian Destroyer was like at that time. Now you see 57,000 of them on any given night. It's diluted, but at the time, you only saw it when Petey Williams hit it, and it won the match. That's what it was until 2017 when Petey challenged Eli Drake for the World's Championship in Ottawa. Nobody had ever kicked out of the Canadian Destroyer. So literally, we protected that move from whatever. What was that? 2006 that PD probably debuted. No, it would have been earlier than that. It would have been 2004. So from 2004 to 2017, nobody ever kicked out of the Canadian Destroyer. And it was such a cool move. 2 years in a row, voted move of the year. It was almost magical at the time. And I understand because like at that time, I would be around the ring a lot because I was producing and overseeing. Like I was basically the lead agent. So if I wasn't producing the match, I was liaisoning with the agent or producer who was producing the match. It all kind of fell under me. So I was around the ring a lot. And PD and the Machine Guns and Jay Lethal and Sanjay Dutt and that whole crew I got close with them. And we would just play around sometimes, and sometimes I'd roll around the ring in the afternoon, and just for shits and giggles, as we say, if I can say that on the air. I would sometimes everybody loved to see it, so we would do shotguns, and I just Canadian Destroyer everybody, right? Because it's funny, right? You see my kind of like thick. We some people might say fat, buddy, and then you see this move done, and it's kind of like, oh my God, because it's like, wait, we barely know how Petey does it. How does this guy do it? So I can understand how you look at that and go, oh, that'll get such a pop. The crowd will, and ultimately we ended up doing it a couple years ago, and the crowd went bonkers, right? Because other than a few house shows, nobody had ever seen it, like seen me do it. And even all these years later, it still got a big pop. So I understand how they got there. But Jeff Jarrett and Dutch Mantel, two men who I have like the utmost respect for. I owe so much in my wrestling career to the opportunities Jeff gave me, and I've learned so many lessons from Jeff and Dutch. I mean, they're two on a long list of amazing mentors I've had. But they were dead set. This move was happening on TV, and I was going to hit it on AJ Styles, and it was kind of like the wow, what a pop, right? Because keep in mind in context, TNA at that time was trying to do anything we could to get any type of buzz about us, to get anybody talking about us, right? To be quote unquote relevant. So I understand where it came from, but I looked at it and instantly I was like, no, this ain't happening. So I went to Dutch and talked to Dutch, and Dutch was steadfast. He's like, man, I'll tell you what, you can keep talking. I don't think I'm ever going to agree with you, but even if you get me to agree, I don't think it matters because there is no way that Jeff's going to back to it's happening. So I march over to Jeff. I talk to Jeff. And remember, both these guys are higher on the food chain than me and mentors to me. And I go over to Jeff and I talk to Jeff and I try to explain. He's just like, Scotty D, I get it. Just effing do it. Okay. Just effing. And I'm like, no. So I might have went and stirred the pot with Petey a little bit and AJ, of course, because AJ had more clout than Petey and I. And he was willing to do it, but he wasn't happy with it because we all wanted to protect Petey's move. That was
Hmm.
Petey's thing. And ultimately, it came to drawing a line in the sand. It's just so dumb. And anyone who ever told me they were going to do this, I would say, don't do this. It's a horrible idea. I literally told Jeff, I'm not doing it. You can fire me. Like, I'll take my bag and I'll go back to the hotel. And then we had, I'm a little dramatic at times. Jeff, great, thankfully, um, understands that and would have been completely within his right to have me escorted off the grounds. Instead, we had a longish, probably 5 minutes conversation about it, and we talked about it, and they acquiesced and said, "Okay, fine." Like, I think he kind of looked at me like you're an idiot because it would be great for you, which I think it would have been. Like, it would have got talk about me, but it wasn't about me. It was about Petey and the match we were building for the
Hmm.
pay per view with Petey and AJ. So it was definitely a group effort because AJ certainly, he was very vocal in his displeasure. Petey less so because he's more political than AJ or I, and smarter in that sense. And then I was dumb enough to say like I'm willing to be fired over this. So we can laugh about it all now. I still think it was the right decision, but then there's part of me go, man, maybe I should have just hit that Canadian destroyer. Maybe I'd have been world champion by '05.
Ooh. Hey, we've seen crazier things happen in pro wrestling.
You never know.
It's so funny when people get so passionate about what is ultimately like one little thing in sort of the greater arc of pro wrestling. But that's why we pursue these strange, odd careers that we do. Let's talk about Maple Leaf. I am curious. It was so impressive the swath of talent you were able to put together for the inaugural events. Konosuke Takeshita having the AEW international title at stake. Josh Alexander, Mike Bailey. I know that was a little bit of sort of a testing the waters for you. Now, with more shows being booked in 2025, how would you say Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling's revival has gone relative to your expectations when you first thought of it?
I mean, I had anxiety that we were going to run our first show and either A, not get the signal out, or B, have a terrible show, or all type of disaster scenarios running through my head, which really isn't doesn't make logical sense. We have Tim Walbert, who's arguably the greatest director in wrestling history, certainly named in the conversation. Keith Mitchell, who is the legend of legends. Nobody sat in the producer's chair and produced more wrestling like on television. Keith has been doing this since world class in the '70s.
Mm-hmm.
He is the guy, the legend that everybody turns to. Kevin Sullivan overseeing our branding and everything else, kind of like our quasi chief marketing officer and creative director, and so much more rolled into one. Emmy winner, the best at what he does. Like all these guys were at WWE, WCW, AEW, TNA during the glory days. Like we have a murderer's row behind the scenes, and we had, like you said, such good talent. Um, the only way these shows cannot come off is if I screwed them up because there's such a good group assembled. So let's probably put more pressure on me in my own brain. But I was so proud of those first shows. I thought it was a great statement. I'm really happy with what we did in March with the follow up with Mayhem here. Those shows, kind of bridge the gap to get us here. But I think we put out 4 really great nights of wrestling action. I'm really proud with the way the show looks and feels production wise. If the biggest complaint you have when watching our production, gauging our production is, oh, this looks a lot like TNA, well, then I'll take that as a compliment because TNA is a big company with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of dollars behind them. So if that's your biggest gripe with us, I acknowledge that going into a building that TNA has ran many times, because I've been running this building in Windsor St.
Mm-hmm.
Clair College for 15 years almost, I think. TNA's ran it many times. So the same building, the same ring, the same production company and gear in there. I concede it looks a lot like TNA did, and like that. Maybe the brands will veer to a different look, I'm sure, with time, but I take that as a compliment. And I think this show coming up, Northern Rising, this Saturday is such a monumental step. I've been saying for over 25 years that I want to run Maple Leaf Gardens. I've been saying it since it was still
Mm-hmm.
Maple Leaf Gardens, which was
Mm-hmm.
so ridiculous and arrogant for me to say back then because it was insane. But now, 25 years later, here we are. really hours away. You can now start counting it in hours where we are away from this event, which I just think is so important. Maple Leaf Gardens, the Mattamy Athletic Center, as it is now, but the former Maple Leaf Gardens is no question the most iconic and historic sports venue in our country, and one of the biggest and most important and prestigious venues in wrestling history. So bringing the Maple Leaf brand of pro wrestling back there for the first time in decades is huge. And going in and running an arena, even though it's not 15,000 seats like it used to be, but running a arena as opposed to, a little college, basketball gym is a huge step up for us. And I think it's a statement piece for us. I'm so excited for Saturday night. I think the crowd's going to be fantastic. I think the show is going to be off the hook, and I think our production is going to be outstanding. So I'm guardedly excited, with a lot of nerves creeping in.
Well, I mean, just to speak to the interest around that show, Matt Cardona, the Good Brothers, Josh Alexander, just a swath of world-class talent. When Maple Leaf revival was announced, it specifically piqued my curiosity because I used to work for Entertainment Tonight Canada, primarily on the digital end, and it was always a little weird to me because here we are as a Canadian branded organization covering a primarily American news source, catering to a global audience on the internet. When you look at sort of Maple Leaf and maintaining its Canadian identity, what are some of the playbooks you can run for expanding this further into Canada? Because I already have people hitting me up being like, when are they coming to Vancouver? When are they coming to the Maritimes?
Yeah, I mean, look, we want this to be a coast to coast company and promotion. We want to get there. It takes a lot. Like this weekend, we take a huge step. So
Mm-hmm.
far in our vast history, since we ran our first show in October, we've ran two sets of events, both in Windsor, both 3 minutes from my house. That's hedging your bets. Now we're moving to Toronto, a big city, the epicenter of a lot of things here in Canada for us, and running this historic venue. Then from there, we go this summer, we go in July to
Mm-hmm.
Montreal. So the idea is to move it around the country, but we have to be strategic, and we have to be cautious, and take great care of this brand. We are a very small operation, which there's things that pop up where I go, well, why didn't we do this? Oh wait, yeah, we don't have somebody who handles that for us like we did at Anthem or TNA. So it's gonna take a while to grow. So I think these events are huge steps. Having the first events, obviously, you can't do anything without running your first event. We did that. Then sometimes the hardest thing to do is follow it up. I think we did pretty well in that. Now we're taking a huge step forward and a step up, I believe, by going to Toronto, by going to Mattamy, the former Maple Leaf Gardens, and running an arena show. And then we turn around and we'll go into to Montreal after that. So we're going to be strategic and cautious with the steps we take. And I think that, with time, as the country continues to rally around us, and as we get more eyeballs on the product, I think that, there's a world where we are running from coast to coast, from Atlantic to Pacific. We get events out there because our mandate is simple. Like, we are a Canadian owned and operated company that operates in Canada with a mandate to develop and feature the very best Canadian talent, both in the ring, like on camera, and behind the scenes. And we do that by blending it with some of the very best talent, both in the ring and behind the scenes in the industry. So this is a Canadian project about highlighting and building Canadians so they can have opportunities. You work in the entertainment space, Shaquille, so you know how difficult it can be at times to get opportunities on a larger scale if you're not American.
Mm-hmm.
So this platform is going to give Canadians that opportunity to build that resume, to build that threshold that you have to hit of international acclaim or extraordinary skill. It's going to give you the package to be able to move to that next level. It's going to showcase you for the larger companies to be able to see you and say, wow, look at this. Did you see this guy or this woman? They're really good, and get that process started. So we become a funnel to develop and showcase Canadians so they can be seen around the world. So we're world class, but we're 100% Canadian. That actually maybe should be a t-shirt.
That was great. I was hoping you'd stop it right there because you got me sold. Shout out to my fellow Canadians putting in the work. Hey, speaking of working, have you found that tape yet of you wrestling The Rock?
You know what's funny is I'm going through some storage here in the last little bit. Found boxes and boxes of tapes. We have a few tapes. There's a few of them that look from they're from the right era and they're the right
Mm-hmm.
format that they could be. So now I've got to find somebody who has the machine to be able to do those, and we'll take a look. Because as it is now, like in our hard drive, like on our hard drives, like in our system, we only have about 10 or 15 seconds of. So if one of these tapes turns out to
Mm-hmm.
be that would be a golden find because as you know, lots of wrestling fans know that is the
Mm-hmm.
only night that The Rock has ever wrestled, ever worked for any wrestling organization other than, the WWE, WWF. So the things he's
Crazy.
done outside of wrestling are Border City Wrestling, all those years ago in that match, him and D'Lo Brown against myself and Larry Destiny. And then if you recall, the other thing he did outside of the WWE universe was when he inducted Ken Shamrock into the Impact Wrestling Hall
Mm-hmm.
of Fame, and it was so cool of Rock to come and do that. And he didn't do it for me, he didn't do it for Impact, he did it for Ken, no question. But so grateful to been able to get the Rock out there on Access TV, which we operated at the time, and then on our show, and able to honor Ken properly with an induction like no other induction.
Before we wrap up on some Maple Leaf again, I'd love to just get your thoughts on a couple other things going on in the pro wrestling landscape. First, this has been a very contentious one, but shout out to the man. Apparently, he's outselling everyone right now in WWE merch over WrestleMania weekend. Who do you think benefited from Joe Hendry's WrestleMania debut? Was it an all around success? Was anyone hurt by it? I loved it, but you see all swaths of opinion from fans and by analysts.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you look at it in the context that we've always looked at how to handle and protect talent in professional wrestling, having your world champion go out there on somebody else's show and get beat pretty um, definitively in a few minutes is not something that would be in anybody's playbook. But that requires looking through a lens of saying, this is our world champion, the world champion, arguably the best in the world. And look, I think Joe's unbelievably great. But I think when you look at the hierarchy of wrestling, the TNA world title, no disrespect at all. Like TNA is in my DNA. Matt
That's
Morgan
another
might sue
shirt.
me for that
Mhm.
line. And anybody should win a contest if they get that reference. But it's
Fun
the
fact:
team.
one of my best friends in the eighth grade was this girl. She knew nothing about sports, nothing about pro wrestling, but boy, did she love Matt Morgan. So,
That's
got
funny.
one viewer strictly through him.
So I mean, look, if you look at it through a strict lens and say, did it protect our world champion? Then you can argue it was a terrible decision. If you logically look at it and say, we just put one of our stars, our biggest star, arguably, or certainly right now, their biggest homegrown star, no question, put it on the biggest stage in the world, and he got a hell of a reaction and got over. Well, then you say it's a success. Like, is the TNA World Championship or Joe Hendry ruined by or damaged in some way by getting beat by Randy Orton in a few minutes? Well, the answer is yes. If you think that anyone considered the TNA World Title and the TNA World Champion the very best in the world, then the answer is yes. If you didn't, and you look at it from a business point of view, then you're saying, hey, we exposed our brand, our belt, our wrestler on the biggest stage. He had a massive entrance. The crowd loved him, and it should ideally result in growth, hopefully, for our brand. So,
Hmm.
um, I don't think in the grand scheme of things that it caused any substantive damage. And I think anyone who was sitting in that chair would probably look at it and go, it's something we have to at least consider doing, because that's a lot of exposure to pass up to protect your world
Totally.
title.
Totally. I agree wholeheartedly. In your opinion, as someone who's been around the business, worked for various promotions, what do you think WWE is trying to accomplish between its soon-to-be acquisition of AAA, the WWE ID program, and this TNA partnership? Like, how is their business model philosophy sort of shifting?
I mean, I don't know how much it's shifting in the sense it's maybe getting a little more strategic, but I mean, I think they've always been about, blanketing the globe. They're the World Wrestling Federation, and they are the one companies that has gone out there and been around the world. They through the middle, they were the first out there and through the Middle East and Europe, everywhere, right? Africa, they've been all around. So I think this approach is maybe a little bit more of a regionalized approach. I think you're starting to see more of a corporate structure to it. That you saw what they attempted to do with NXT UK, and it had some success. Ultimately, didn't succeed certainly, but it provides the groundworks maybe to look at things like that. Lucha Libre market is very that Latino market LATAM market is so unique. And WWE went into the Mexican market hard years ago, and for a very short time, they really caused issues for CMLL and AAA at the time. But that faded because there's such a strong cultural connection
Mm-hmm.
to the Lucha Libre product, the history, the mythology of it all. So I think WWE is smart enough to go, we're not going to succeed necessarily by going in here and just taking over. So let's find a way to align ourselves in the marketplace. So by acquiring AAA, they've acquired a brand with decades of history that has a strong infrastructure. Dorian has done a fantastic job, I think, since leading AAA, since he's taken over the leadership of the company. Obviously his uncle Antonio Pena was a legend, built one of the hottest periods in CMLL, had AAA on fire until his untimely passing. But I think it's a great acquisition in the sense that it for WWE, in the sense they now have a brand that's well established and has LATAM infrastructure. So WWE can now fund and support AAA in a way that they never AAA never could on their own. So I think you have to look at it, anything acquisition like this, and be cautious and say, hey, where do we sit in 5 years? In 5 years, if WWE is owned and completely taken over AAA and assimilated it in, if WWE has done that with TNA, if WWE has done that with Pro Wrestling Noah, then I think you can argue whether that's good for the business or not. I think one of the things that's really great in the business right now, and people can like it or hate it, but AEW joining the wrestling business, what Tony Khan, the
Yep.
Khan family have done, has certainly made wrestling better. It's made it a better place for talent.
Mm-hmm.
It's made a better place to work in the industry. It's made a better place for fans because it gives you more options. And it challenged WWE to get better. And that's what challenger brands do. And I think AEW, what they've built is fantastic. And, I know that there's talk that, WWE doesn't look at AEW as competition, and I respectfully don't believe that, because I remember getting phone calls, um, you know, where people in WWE were assigned to watch our TNA show, even when it was on Fox Sports Net at 3 o'clock on a Friday. And I know they kept watching it all through our Spike days. So do they consider them a threat in the sense that, hey, they're going to come in and take them over? No, but you've got a very well-funded wrestling company on a major, major network, and now a great streaming platform. And then let's look at it through a clean lens. There's a lot of talent that had the option to go to WWE and had the option to go to AEW.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that talent chose to go to AEW. So that doesn't mean AEW is just as big as WWE. It doesn't mean that AEW is going to run WWE out of business. But I don't buy that WWE isn't paying attention to AEW. There's no way that you lose out on that many talents and don't pay attention to it. So I think WWE is building the infrastructure to be able to have a global its tentacles spread out globally into the various markets. I'm sure they're looking at getting into the India market. I'm sure they're looking at getting back into the Euro market, and that's fine. I mean, they want to build their own system so that there is WWE wrestling, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good position for them to be building from for themselves. But I think wrestling will always be better as long as there is those challenger brands, as long as there is a strong number two, as long as there is a vibrant independent scene. So, you know, does WWE want a vibrant scene? I hope so. You know, I hope that they know that they're strong enough to that none of this is going to be problem. It becomes a breeding ground for them. But it looks like WWE less so than relying on the independents and the smaller brands to develop the talent. They're going to get their hands into the mix a whole lot sooner with the ID program and Evolve and these regional offices as they start to set them up. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Scott, could I get like 5 more minutes of your time?
Sure.
Yeah, perfect. First, we know Tiger Woods is the king of the green, but who wins a wrestling match between Kerwin White and Chip Birdy?
Oh, Chip Birdy crushes Kerwin White. Come on. Chip Birdy got thrown off of the Ben Hogan tour for excessive violence. Oh man,
Jeez.
not even close.
Stupid question. My apologies, Scott.
I'll allow it.
I just don't tell Chip.
No, never.
I always put out a fan Q&A, and we've sprinkled them through, but this was by far one of the most requested. Could you just give me one of your favorite moments from TNA, whether that be in the ring or something that happened behind the scenes? Obviously, that early 2000s to late 2000s, early 2010 run has a very special place in a lot of people's hearts, mine included.
Yeah, narrowing it down to one, so difficult. There's one that I think that was special. There's a lot that are special and have historical significance. I think one that I'll always kind of remember, like in my heart, is when we did that first Sunday 3-hour pay-per-view from the Universal Studios in Orlando. That video package that David Zahadi, who's so very, very talented and has done so much of the great like video and creative work in wrestling, from the Blassie Legends to the West Side Story Royal Rumble promo spot to so many things he's did. That package he did to kind of announce, like, we had been crawling. We had been running the Nashville State Fairgrounds. We had moved and put our show onto Fox Sports Net. Now we're moving into the space and doing a traditional full-length 3-hour pay-per-view, in Universal Studios. Watching that video package, because back then, remember, it was all rear projection, right? So we're all standing there watching it from the backside. And it was like there was a lot of tears and eyes, and there was a lot of people that kind of sunk in, like we really have a chance to do something effing special here. And that show I thought was a great show, and I think that helped. That was kind of a watershed moment for us when we said, okay, we may not be adults yet as a company, but we're not babies anymore. So that to me was a really special key moment, getting to be there with Team Canada, which was such a close-knit, great group, and the AJs and so many of the people that have been part of getting us there. Like, that'll always be a special moment for me.
Scott, I want to end on this note ahead of Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling Northern Rising, May 10th on Triller, running out of the legendary Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. If there's one match people cannot miss, what would it be?
This question comes up, and it's so hard to answer when you look at the card and you talk about a 20-man, gauntlet, which is TNA style gauntlet for the gold, right? It's the Royal Rumble until it comes down to the last two, and then it's the singles. That's loaded with stars. Like, you talk about Sabre versus Gresham, where the technical wrestling is going to be so unbelievably good. You talk about Kylie Ray versus Giselle Shaw to crown the first ever women's Canadian champion. You talk about Serena Deeb's Miyu and that match, with wrestler, grappler versus striker. To me, ultimately, I think one of the things on this loaded card, Good Brothers, War Dogs, it just keeps going. The one match to me that I think sums up a lot of what's cool about wrestling today, and whether you look at it with WWE and those relationships that they've built, and we've talked about whether you talk about the alliance that AEW has built with New Japan and CMLL and Rev Pro in that, because I mean, all this talk of WWE, TNA, everything, sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
lose track. AEW's been doing this since their
Mm-hmm.
existence, and TNA has been doing it for longer than that. Um, but I mean, to me, when you look at you've got three amazing wrestlers from three different countries, from three different companies, where you've got Zack Sabre Jr., you've got you've got Speedball Mike Bailey, and you've got Michael Oku. So you've got New Japan, you've got AEW, and you've got Rev Pro, and you've got these individuals in this match. It's three companies coming together under a fourth company's banner to just tear the freaking house down and highlight what modern wrestling is in the most historic venue in history.